Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's Tuesday, so let's do a little truck talk. Last night on my social media, I asked my veteran driver friends, it's a nice way of saying the old guys, what what uh, what we grew up with in the industry that the new generation is missing out on. I got some really good suggestions. James Bailey said, real truck stops with areas just for drivers and the phones in the booths. Man, sitting in those uh, counters that was just for the drivers, man, you could hear some great tales. Uh, Sometimes you get some good knowledge. Uh, Mostly, though, it was just a big old load of BS. We used to say every truck driver was a doctor and a lawyer, and they could complain about anything, and it's true. You met some real characters there. When I was in high school, from 10th grade till I graduated and left for the service, I worked at that truck stop. I worked at the Hamilton Truck Plaza in Hamilton, Pennsylvania. And what an experience that was. Man, you met some interesting characters. I still remember some of them. You had Duke and Domino and Whiskey Bill, and let's see, we had Tomcat and Crazy Gary. As just some of the drivers that would frequent through there. Uh, Hamilton, Pennsylvania is located right off Interstate 80, and an impressionable young man. Heard some of the stories from these guys. It was quite interesting. Uh, the phones in the booths back before cell phones and before the PeopleNet, Qualcomm, all that stuff. First thing in the morning, you'd have to call your dispatcher and get your load information, which consisted of your pickup number, your address, the phone number of either the broker or the customer. And if it was a broker load, you called the broker and got information from him. Then you'd call the customer that you were picking up or delivering to and get directions. And once you wrote that chicken scratch out, you had to make it line up with your Rand McNally map. Of course, we didn't have GPS then. But now, if you were in a truck stop that was in the same town, chances are you can get directions to your customer from one of the drivers there or even one of the waitresses, which made it pretty handy. Uh, my buddy Haas, he says almost the same thing. A Rand McNally map, notepad and pen, a roll of quarters, because you had to feed quarters to the machine to the phone. I think calling cards were just coming out about the time I started in driving. So roll of quarters, yeah, you would call dispatch, you'd feed $1 worth of quarters in, and you got like 3 minutes, so you made it quick. Uh, Funny you should mention the Rand McNally. I still carry mine with me today. I don't trust that GPS. So if I'm going to some place I haven't been before, I'll double check with my MAP to compare against my GPS. As for the big green Stanley, well, buddy, mine's not green, mine's white, and it holds a full pot of coffee. The truck and bozo at 7 a.m. For some of you, you may catch reruns of that on Sirius XM. I think he's still on Sirius XM. But yeah, the trucking bozo, he was on AM AM stations, and as you went from city to city, you'd have to go through the dial and pick them back up. Kind of like us nighttime drivers, we find AM Coast to Coast with Art Bell, and then later on George Norrie. Uh, Skylar says, "Women flashing the drivers on the interstate." That was a good way of making a driver's day. You'd be trucking along and you look down, and from up here you can see down in there, and every once in a while a generous young lady would bloop, pop them out and toot the horn and keep on trucking. Good time, Skylar. Scott says a shifter on the floor with 3 pedals and a CB hanging from the roof. Well, every once in a while you can find a truck that still has the 3 pedals. I actually remember there was a time that we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pedals on the ground. Your accelerator, your brake, your clutch, your high beam, low beam, your tilt adjust, and an air starter. Those things would scare the hell out of anybody. It made a hell of a racket. You push the button and it actuated the airline, which the air would start the starter up. Now, if you had an air leak, you'd have to have somebody come and actually put air into your air tank so you could start your truck up. Instead of getting a jump start, you got an air start. As for the CB on the roof, I still got mine. Still got the CB Rambos out here talking all kinds of trash. Trying to remember the guy's name. I think he was out in Oklahoma City, and he had a big radio, and you couldn't get any local information or anything because he'd come on there and he says, "Got my nightgown on, got on my pretty pink panties, and it's time to go to bed." I think the FCC ended up shutting him down, and it's been a long time since I've heard him on the radio, so he's probably passed on by now. Now, there's another fella that runs up in the northeast area. Like, I pick him up around Virginia and Pennsylvania. I think they refer to him as going to the shelf. But he's quite comical to listen to the first 4 or 5 times he runs his spiel out. But after that, he gets a little annoying. You don't hear many people talking on the CB much. Mostly us old timers. That was the way we kept ourselves awake at night, driving through the wee hours of the morning or late at night. It was a bit more of a sorority back then. And you knew each other by your CB handle. You might run into so and so at the truck stop, and you don't know his real name, you just know his CB handle. But there still are some characters out here that you can carry on a conversation with. You might see somebody going, westbound as you're going eastbound, and you'll holler at them and say, "Hey, how's things going on at home?" Randy Hurd says parking spots between midnight and 6 a.m. Yeah, no kidding there. He says fewer idiots on the road, but there were still some. I don't think they have driver education in school anymore. That might be something they want to bring back with shop class and home ec. Paper logs. We used to call them storybooks. liar sheets. You could actually rewrite time, you know, keep track of your mileage and your fuel stops, and you could extend your day out by 6, 8, 10 hours if you were good at it. Now, a good DOT officer could look at your logbook and knew it was nothing but lies because it was way too neat. Randy also says calling customers for directions. You know, there's a few times that I've called for directions and I get a hold of some secretary or something, and you'd ask her, hey, I'm coming off of, you know, I-95. What exit do I need to take? And she'd say, I don't know. It's like, well, you work there, don't you? Yeah. How do you get to work? My husband drives. So you don't know how you get to work other than your husband drives you? Yeah, some of those things were kind of irritating, but you just be as polite as possible and say, hey, well, is there somebody there I can talk to that can give me directions to come get this load from you? Going back to something that James and Haas talked about, a roll of quarters or a phone in the booth. Before before we had cell phones, that's how we called home and checked and seen how things were. Usually, you called at the beginning of the day or at the end of your day, and usually between 5 and 7 o'clock, it was a little bit of a wait to get on a payphone. Now with the advent of calling cards, you could sit at your booth waiting on your dinner, and you push in the numbers that were on your calling card, and you got charged. I don't remember what it was. I think William Shatner had a deal going on with some calling card at one time, but it was like $1.35 or something like that a minute. I think it was cheaper to call collect, but you'd call at the beginning or the end of the day, just say hello to the family and make sure everything was going all right. Uh, I remember. I'll never let my wife live this down. We were living in Pennsylvania at the time. We hadn't moved to Tennessee yet, and I had just gotten my first flip phone, and at that time you could talk for free from, I think it was 8 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning. So a lot of the calls were made at bedtime, and on my way to Texas, my phone actually quit working. So I didn't talk to her the night before, and I stopped for fuel, and I parked. I didn't stay parked on the fuel island. I was a responsible driver. Excuse me. And I went in and got change for $1 bill or $5 bill actually at that time, because it was like $3 to call home. I'm sorry, I got a tickle in my throat. Excuse me again. But I called. I had stopped at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and she hadn't gotten out of bed yet. So I called, and she didn't answer the first time. So I hung up before the answer machine picked it up. If you remember those things, that was before call waiting. Whenever you call, you get a busy signal if somebody was on the phone. But I call. It was like 6 rings before the answer machine would pick it up. So I hung it up so I get my change back, and I called back. I ended up calling like 2 or 3 times, and finally, before it was like the third time, she picked it up on the third ring, and she said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Morning, baby." She said, "Ha ha, funny," and hung up. Well, it took my $3 worth of quarters, and it took her about 15, 20 seconds to tell me to piss up a rope, And so I was like, well, I gotta go. Get on down the road. I'll try calling her tonight. And I happened to be running with a friend of ours, so she called his cell phone. We're going down the road, probably about an hour or so later, and she calls. She'd been trying to call my cell phone. Well, she called his phone, which was costing him money, and he hollered at me on the CB, "Hey, your wife's trying to get a hold of you." So we pulled off alongside the road and turned the four ways on, and I walked back and borrowed his phone to call her. And she's like, "What did you want calling me that early in the morning?" "I wanted to call you and tell you that my cell phone wasn't working." And she said, "Oh." So she got to eat a big old crusty plate of crow. Yeah, one of the few times I got one over her. But I got some great stories from the road. Uh, Breaking into business back then was different too. You didn't go to a school. You actually had to know somebody in the business. And you'd ride with them for a while. My uncle Wendell broke me in, and I rode with him for quite a few months, and I didn't get paid for driving. I got paid for lumping. Now, lumping's another one of those trucking terms is you actually had to pay the receiver money to unload their freight off of your trailer and palletize it. Well, that's how I got paid was I would unload the trailer, palletize it, and charge charge the broker a fee for that. So you could unload an entire trailer for like 300, 400, $500, and it might take you 6 or 8 hours after driving all day to get there. But our first, it was one of our first trips out, and I didn't even have a license yet. I still had a permit, and he was sleeping in the bunk, and I stopped. I still remember it was a TA in Earl, Arkansas, and I stopped and got fuel. Well, we paid for fuel with cash then. So you had to go in, you'd give them $200 to $300, and they would turn your pump on, and then whatever money you didn't use, you went in and got your change and your fuel receipt. Well, I went in, give them $300, come out, pump my fuel, pulled pulled up off the fuel island, and went in, got my fuel receipt, and proceeded on down the road. I get about 30, 40 minutes down the road, and all of a sudden I'm getting pulled over by a sheriff's deputy. I wasn't speeding, and so I pull off the side of the road there, and he, the sheriff's deputy comes up to the truck, and I put the window down, and he says, "Driver, you forgetting something?" I said, "No, I got my fuel receipt. I got my change back. I filled out my logbook like I was supposed to." And about that time, my uncle comes, crawls in the passenger seat, and he says, "Hey, Jackwagon, you forgot me." Well, I didn't realize he'd gotten out of the sleeper to go use the bathroom while we were stopped. And so after that, we made a rule: if we were stopped for some reason, you put a pillow on the steering wheel so that we knew that the other person wasn't in the sleeper. Yeah, good times. But so what I'm thinking, let me get my other notes out here, my idea book. Um, Next Tuesday, I want to do a top 10. I'm going to do a top 10 of the best trucking movies. Uh, what made me think of this was it was around COVID time. I was training a brand new driver, fresh out of driving school. And it was about the time that everybody was calling truck drivers, you know, we were heroes, we were essential workers. And he said, man, isn't it great being treated like this? And I said, you do realize that back in the 70s, they used to make movies and songs and whole albums about us truck drivers. You know, things were a little bit different then. But go ahead and leave in the comments there, after you like the video, of course, and subscribe. In the comments, leave me your favorite trucking movies. And I'm going to compile a list of the top 10, probably about Thursday or Friday on the YouTube channel. Uh, I'll put the top 5 and get you guys to vote on them, and that way it's not just me picking the top 10. So Thursday we'll do the top 5, and then Friday we'll vote on the next 5, and we'll compile our top 10 like that. So if you want your favorite movie in there, put it in the comments, and then hopefully people will vote for it. So until next time, guys, be a blessing to somebody. Be the reason they're having a good day. Catch you on down the road.